The Celestial Preserve's medical wing had never seen chaos like this. Dr. Sarah Blackwood pressed her back against the reinforced walls as security personnel rushed past, their faces grim behind tactical visors. The emergency klaxons wailed like banshees, their red light painting the corridor in blood-colored shadows that reminded her of the battlefield hospitals she'd left behind on Mars. All non-essential personnel to evacuation stations. Captain Vex's voice crackled through the intercom, his usual Xantharian composure cracking under pressure. The Morthic has breached containment. Sarah's heart hammered as she watched the parade of terror nurses wheeling patients toward safety pods, researchers clutching their life's work in trembling hands, and guards charging toward the preserves. Heart with weapons that looked more like instruments of war than peacekeeping tools. She'd seen panic before, in the refugee camps of the outer colonies, but this was different. This was 50 races united in terror of a single creature. Through the chaos, she caught glimpses of the responders, converging on Sector 7. Lieutenant Commander Thorne of the Human Defense Corps, his cybernetic arm whirring as he calibrated a quantum net launcher. Dr. Kellara Zinn, the Altarian psychologist whose empathic abilities had failed to reach the creature for 3 centuries. And Chief Warden Krex, whose rock-like Goliathan frame actually trembled as he coordinated. The response dot the floor beneath Sarah's feet vibrated with each thunderous crash from the preserve's depths. The sound wasn't just noise. It was agony made audible, a roar that seemed to tear through reality itself. She'd heard it before during her research, but never like this. Never with such raw, unfiltered desperation. Dr. Blackwood, Marcus Chun, her research assistant, grabbed her arm. His usually steady hands shook as he thrust a data pad toward her. The containment field generators are failing. Whatever we tried to feed, it triggered something massive. Sarah scanned the biometric readings, her xenobiology training kicking in despite the chaos. The Morthic's neural patterns were unlike anything in their 300-year database, not the erratic spikes of simple rage, but something far more complex. Pain, yes, but beneath it. Longing? Recognition? The patterns reminded her of the grief counseling sessions she'd observed in the war veteran wards. The quantum dampeners aren't working. Dr. Zinn's voice cut through the noise as she stumbled past, her normally pristine white coat torn and stained. It's like the creature is immune to every form of pacification we've developed. The neural suppressors just make it angrier. Another crash shook the station, and Sarah heard Captain Vex shouting tactical coordinates to his team. She'd studied the Morthac for months, poring over every scrap of data about the last survivor of the galaxy's oldest known civilization. The creature had been found drifting in space, its homeworld nothing but cosmic dust, its species extinct for millennia. Every attempt to communicate had failed. Every effort to ease its suffering had only seemed to amplify its rage. But now, watching the terror in her colleagues' faces, Sarah realized something the data couldn't capture. They weren't just dealing with a dangerous animal. They were witnessing the breakdown of a mind that had been trapped in solitary confinement for 3 centuries, surrounded by beings who couldn't understand its pain. "I need to get to Sector 7, she said, surprising herself. With her calm tone, Marcus stared at her as if she'd announced plans to walk into a black hole. "Sarah, that's suicide. The containment field is down, and 50 guards can't—" "The guards are the problem," she interrupted, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "They're not trying to help it. They're trying to control it." Asterisk, the main corridor to Sector 7 looked like a war zone. Blast marks scorched the walls where energy weapons had missed their target, and the air shimmered with the residual heat of quantum discharge. Sarah picked her way through the debris, following the trail of destruction toward the preserve's central chamber. The sounds grew louder as she approached, the whine of charging weapons, shouted commands in a dozen languages, and beneath it all, that haunting roar that seemed to come from the very soul of the universe. She paused at the final checkpoint, where Sergeant Reeves of the human security detail stood guard, his face pale behind his helmet's visor. "Dr. Blackwood, you can't go." "In there," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Orders are to maintain the perimeter until what?" Sarah challenged. "Until you kill it? Until you drug it into submission? Look at me, Sergeant. Do I look like a threat to your tactical operation?" Through the reinforced windows, she could see the disaster unfolding. The Morthic stood in the center of the preserve's main chamber, a magnificent and terrible sight. 20 feet of crystalline spines caught the emergency lighting, turning the creature into a living prism of pain. Its eyes, those ancient star-bright eyes, swept across the circle of guards surrounding it, and in them Sarah saw something that made her chest tighten. Complete, devastating loneliness. Captain Vex coordinated the response from a mobile command post, his tactical displays showing the creature's position, energy readings, and probable movement patterns. "Neural dampener grid is at maximum intensity," he reported to someone off-screen. "Target remains unaffected. Requesting authorization for lethal force." The guards formed a perfect circle around the Morthic, their weapons trained on various points of its massive body. Sarah recognized the formation from her military training. It was a classic containment pattern, designed to prevent escape while minimizing casualties. But as she watched, she realized how wrong they all were. The creature wasn't trying to escape. It was trying to communicate. Each movement, each gesture, each ear-splitting roar was directed at a different guard, as if the Morthac was desperately attempting to reach them. Its massive head would turn toward the Xantharian contingent, then swing to face the human guards, then pivot toward the Altarian psychics. It was searching for something or someone who could understand. "It's not attacking them," Sarah whispered, the pieces falling into place. "It's trying to find someone who recognizes what it's feeling." Dr. Zinn stood nearby, her empathic abilities focused on the creature. Sweat beaded on her blue-tinted forehead as she strained to make contact. "I can sense its emotions," she said, her voice tight with effort. "The pain is indescribable, but there's something else. It's not just suffering, it's searching." Lieutenant Commander Thorne adjusted his cybernetic arm, the weapon system cycling through different frequencies. Whatever it's looking for, it's not finding it. The aggression levels are increasing. We need to act before. The more the roar cut him off, a sound so filled with anguish that several guards stepped back involuntarily. The creature's crystalline spines flared with bioluminescent patterns that Sarah had never seen before. Complex, beautiful, and utterly alien. It was trying to communicate in its own language, but no one present could understand. Chief Warden Krex's stone-like features cracked with uncertainty. 300 years, he rumbled. 300 years of trying every known form of communication. Every sedative, every technological solution. Nothing works. Maybe it's time to consider that some problems don't have solutions. "No," Sarah said, pushing past Sergeant Reeves. "Some problems just need the right translator." She entered the chamber and immediately felt the weight of 50 weapons, potentially turning in her direction. The Morthoc's ancient eyes found her across the chaos, and for a moment the creature's movement stilled. Sarah took another step forward, her heart pounding but her mind clear. "Dr. Blackwood, stand down." Captain Vex's voice cracked with authority. "And fear. You're compromising the tactical situation." But Sarah was already moving, her focus entirely on the creature that had been alone for so long that it had forgotten how to be anything but afraid. The moment Sarah entered the chamber, the atmosphere changed. The Morthic's bioluminescent spines dimmed from their aggressive crimson to a softer, more questioning blue. Its massive head tilted, studying her with an intelligence that made her breath catch. For the first time in 3 centuries, The creature seemed to be seeing, rather, than just looking. "Hold your positions." Captain Vex barked, but his voice carried a note of uncertainty. "Dr. Blackwood, you are in violation of emergency protocols. Return to the perimeter immediately." Sarah ignored him, her focus entirely on the creature before her. She'd spent months studying the Morthic's behavioral patterns, analyzing its neural responses, trying to understand what made it so unreachable. Now, standing in its presence, she realized that all their scientific approaches had missed the fundamental truth. The creature wasn't broken. It was grieving. "It's not trying to hurt anyone," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "Look at its posture, the spine positioning, the way it's holding its head. This isn't aggressive behavior. It's submissive. It's been pleading with us for 3 centuries." Dr. Zinn's empathic senses flared, and she gasped. "She's right. The emotional resonance is shifting. It's hope. The creature is feeling hope for the first time since we began monitoring it. Asterisk." The Morthic took a cautious step toward Sarah, its movements fluid despite its massive size. The guards tensed, weapons tracking its motion, but Sarah raised her hand, not in threat or command, but in the universal gesture of peace she'd learned in the refugee camps. "Stop. I see you." "I understand." The creature stopped immediately, its star-bright eyes fixed on her outstretched hand. Then, slowly, it lowered its great head until it was level with Sarah's position. She could feel its breath, surprisingly warm, carrying scents of ozone and something indefinably ancient. "My God," Lieutenant Commander Thorne whispered, his cybernetic arm lowering involuntarily. "It's communicating." "Not communicating," Sarah corrected, taking another step forward, recognizing. "It's been trying to find someone who understands what it's been through." The creature's bioluminescent patterns shifted again, cycling through colors that seemed to tell a story. Deep purples that spoke of loss, flickering golds that hinted at memory, and beneath it all, a steady pulse of blue that Sarah somehow knew meant loneliness. She'd seen similar patterns in her research on trauma responses, the way survivors of catastrophic events carried their pain in their bodies, their movements, their very presence. "The Morthic are empathic," she explained, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "But they don't just sense current emotions. They can feel the genetic memory of entire species, the traumatic imprints that get passed down through generations." Captain Vex stepped forward, his tactical mind trying to process this new information. "Are you saying it's been scanning us? Reading our ... genetic memories?" "Reading them and finding them incomprehensible," Sarah confirmed. "Most of the species represented here have never faced true extinction. The Xantharians expanded across their system before their sun died. The Altarians transcended physical form when their world became uninhabitable. Even the Goliathans simply migrated to new worlds when theirs became unstable." She gestured to the guards surrounding them. "But humans, we carry something different. We've been to the edge of extinction dozens of times. Ice ages, plagues, wars, disasters. We've stared into the abyss and somehow found the will to continue." The Morthic's massive form trembled, and Sarah realized it was crying not with tears, but with a subsonic vibration that resonated through the chamber's walls. The creature had been searching for someone who understood that particular frequency of loss, that specific resonance of survival against impossible odds. "It's been trying to find another species that knows what it's like to be the last," Sarah said, her own voice thick with emotion. "Another people who've carried the weight of potentially being the final generation." Chief Warden Krex's stone features softened with something approaching understanding. The creature's homeworld. The archaeological reports suggested a global catastrophe. Asteroid impact, atmospheric collapse. It watched its entire species die. And it's been alone with that knowledge for 3 centuries, Sarah continued, surrounded by beings who've never experienced that level of existential terror. No wonder it's been going mad. Amorthic lifted its head, and Sarah saw something in its ancient eyes that made her heart break. Recognition. Not of her specifically, but of what she represented. The creature had finally found a kindred spirit. Someone whose species carried the same deep scars of survival. Sarah extended her hand fully, palm open, fingers relaxed. The gesture was simple, human, but it carried the weight of 10,000 years of species memory. The Morphex studied her hand with the intensity of a scholar examining a sacred text, its crystalline spines shifting through a spectrum of colors that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. Neural activity is spiking, Dr. Zinn reported. Her empathic abilities stretched to their limits. But it's not distress. It's communion. The creature is trying to establish a deeper connection than we've ever seen. The chamber fell silent, except for the hum of equipment and the creatures. Steady breathing. The 50 guards remained in position, but their weapons had lowered slightly, trained more on the ground than on the Morphec itself. Even the most hardened veterans seemed to sense they were witnessing something unprecedented. The creatures. Massive head moved closer to Sarah's outstretched hand, and she could feel the electromagnetic field that surrounded its body. A warm, tingling sensation that spoke of intelligence so ancient it predated most star systems. When the Morphic's forehead finally touched her palm, the contact was electric. Suddenly, Sarah was no longer standing in the preserve chamber. She was floating in space, watching a blue-green world die in slow motion. Massive asteroids pummeled the surface, while the atmosphere burned away in beautiful, terrible streamers. She could feel the Morphec's memory of its final days watching. Its people gather in the great crystal cities, singing their death songs as the sky fell. But underneath the alien memories, she felt something familiar, the same desperate determination that had driven humans to survive the Toba supervolcanic eruption, the same stubborn refusal to accept extinction that had carried her species through ice ages and plagues. The recognition was mutual and instant. "It's working," Lieutenant Commander Thorne breathed, his cybernetic sensors detecting energy patterns unlike anything in their databases. The creature's stress indicators are dropping to levels we've never recorded. The Morphex bioluminescent. Patterns shifted to a warm golden hue that seemed to fill the chamber with light. Its massive form relaxed, settling into a position that, while still imposing, no longer radiated the desperate energy of a caged animal. For the first time in 3 centuries, the creature looked peaceful. "Dr. Blackwood," Captain Vex said carefully, "what exactly is happening?" Sarah kept her hand pressed against the creature's forehead, feeling the flow of shared understanding passing between them. "We're grieving together," she said simply. "The Morphec has been carrying the weight of species extinction alone for 300 years. It's been trying to find someone who understands that specific type of loss." The creature's eyes, those ancient, star-bright eyes fixed on Sarah's face with an expression she could only describe as gratitude. It shifted its massive bulk, settling into a more comfortable position while maintaining contact with her hand. The movement was careful, deliberate, designed not to alarm the guards who still surrounded them. "Humans don't just know loss intellectually," Sarah continued, her voice carrying a note of wonder. "We carry it in our DNA, our stories, our collective unconscious. Every human radiates the same frequency of survival that the Morphic has been desperately seeking." Dr. Zinn stepped forward, her empathic abilities detecting subtle changes in the chamber's emotional atmosphere. "The creature's aggression patterns are completely gone. I'm reading curiosity, relief, and something else, ... hope. It's actually feeling hope." The Morphic made a sound not the ear-splitting roar of anguish they'd grown accustomed to, but a low, harmonic vibration that seemed to resonate through the chamber's walls. It was, Sarah realized, the sound of a being that had been holding its breath for centuries, finally allowing itself to exhale. The violent episodes, she said, the final pieces falling into place, they weren't random attacks. They were attempts to communicate its pain to species that had never experienced existential terror. It was trying to make us understand what it felt like to be the last. Chief Warden Krex's massive form moved closer, his stone-like features showing more emotion than anyone had ever seen from him. 3 centuries of failed treatments, and the solution was simply understanding? Not just understanding, Sarah. Corrected recognition. The Morthic needed to know it wasn't alone in its type of suffering. It needed to find another species that had stared into the abyss of extinction and somehow found the will to continue. The creature's crystalline spines pulsed with a gentle rhythm, and Sarah felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced since before the war. The Morthic wasn't just calming down, it was healing, finding solace in the presence of someone who truly understood its pain. Asterisk. The transformation was remarkable. Over the following hours, as Sarah maintained contact with the Morthic, the creature began to exhibit behaviors that hadn't been seen in 3 centuries of observation. It moved with purpose rather than desperation, its bioluminescent patterns shifting to colors that spoke of curiosity rather than anguish. The guards gradually relaxed their positions, though they remained alert. Captain Vex had established a new perimeter that gave the creature more space while maintaining security protocols. The emergency klaxons had been silenced, replaced by the gentle hum of monitoring equipment and the soft sounds of the creature's breathing. The implications are staggering, Dr. Zinn whispered, her empathic abilities now able to read the Morthic's emotional state with unprecedented clarity. It's not just calm, it's engaged. For the first time since we've been monitoring it, the creature is actually interested in its surroundings. Sarah had been standing with her hand against the Morthic's forehead for hours, but she felt no fatigue. The connection was energizing rather than draining, like a conversation with an old friend who understood her deepest fears and hopes. Through the contact, she could feel the creature's gratitude, its relief at finally finding someone who comprehended its unique form of suffering. It's been trying to process the trauma of being the last survivor, she explained to the assembled observers. But trauma requires witness, and witness requires understanding. The Morthic couldn't heal because it was surrounded by beings who had never experienced what it had endured. Lieutenant Commander Thorne approached carefully, his cybernetic armed sensors detecting the electromagnetic patterns flowing between human and alien. The energy readings are unlike anything we've recorded. It's as if you're sharing some form of psychic bandwidth? Not psychic, Sarah corrected. Empathic. The Morthic can sense the emotional resonance of entire species. And humans carry something unique, the genetic memory of survival. We've been shaped by extinction events, forged by loss, and strengthened by our refusal to give up. The creature's massive head turned toward the approaching officers, but its movements were curious rather than threatening. It seemed to be studying them with new interest, as if Sarah's presence had somehow made the other beings in the chamber more comprehensible. Dr. Blackwood, Captain Vex said, his voice carrying a note of professional concern, how long can you maintain this connection? Your vital signs are stable, but we don't know the long-term effects of extended contact. Sarah smiled, feeling the Morthic's amusement at the question ripple through their connection. It's not draining me, Captain. If anything, it's healing. Both of us. The creature has been carrying the weight of species extinction alone for 3 centuries. I've been carrying the weight of war trauma for 3 years. We're helping each other process losses that seemed impossible to bear alone. The Morthic's bioluminescent patterns shifted to a complex weaving of colors that seemed to tell a story. Sarah found herself understanding the visual language instinctively. It was showing her memories of its homeworld, Not the dying moments she'd experienced before, but the living world as it had been. Cities of crystal and light, beings of incredible beauty and intelligence, art and music that had been created across millennia. It's sharing its culture, she breathed, wonder filling her voice. The Morthic isn't just a survivor, it's a living library. It carries the complete cultural memory of its species. Dr. Zin's empathic abilities detected the shift in the creature's emotional patterns. The trauma is still there, but it's being integrated rather than simply endured. The creature is processing its grief in a healthy way for the first time since we've known it. Chief Warden Krex moved closer, his massive form no longer seeming threatening to the alien creature. If this connection can be maintained, we might be able to help it share those memories. The Morthek could teach us about one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations. The creature's eyes turned toward the Goliathan Warden, and Sarah felt its curiosity about the different species surrounding it. Through their connection, she could sense the Morthek's growing interest in learning about its caregivers, understanding their cultures and perspectives. The healing goes both ways, Sarah realized. The creature isn't just being helped, it's remembering how to connect with others. The Morthic were a social species. Isolation was as damaging to it as the trauma itself. As if responding to her words, the creature carefully extended one of its massive appendages toward Captain Vex. The gesture was slow and deliberate, designed to be non-threatening. When the Xantharian officer didn't retreat, the Morthic gently touched his shoulder with the tip of its crystalline spine. The contact lasted only seconds, but Vex's eyes widened with something approaching wonder. I felt understanding. Not my thoughts, but my intentions. It knows I'm not a threat. Sarah felt the creature's satisfaction through their connection. The Morthek was learning to trust again, to see the beings around it as potential companions rather than incomprehensible aliens. The healing that had begun with recognition was blossoming into something far more profound, the return of hope. 50 guards couldn't calm the beast, she said softly, because it was never a beast. It was a mourner who had been grieving alone for centuries. All it needed was someone who understood that grief is not madness, it's love with nowhere to go. The Morthic's harmonic vibration filled the chamber, and Sarah knew without translation that it was the sound of a being who had finally found its way home. Asterisk.